Chapter 37. Day 7. 0900 hours. Sun's out, guns out, boys and girls! DJ's voice rang out over what remained of Happy Island. The storm was only feet behind Cameron and his friends, and a new batch of monsters had spawned in the valley below. Cameron opened his eyes, still strapped into his exosuit, and looked up into the sky. Day 7, DJ continued. The last day of the beginning of your lives. It's been one hell of a show, Happy Islanders. I salute you all.
I grow tired of that man,
Floof sighed as they all listened. As we all watch the final day of Bloodgames, I want to recognize everyone that made it thus far. Biyu from China, Behram from Iran, Jasmine from Russia, Cameron from the USA, Pavani from India, Bernard from Somalia, Andreas from the Netherlands, Stephen from Australia, Maria from Mexico, Katie from Canada, Floof from Belgium, and finally Alexa from the United Kingdom. You have all exceeded my expectations, and I commend each and every one of you. Now, before you all march to battle or decide to make peace or whatever happens, I want to go ahead and explain a few things. This season, the end point is going to be the Resurrection Sphere. By 11 o'clock tonight, the storm will have grown to a point that only the sphere remains. The monsters are all level 15, and bosses will be released at noon and 9 p.m. Finally, keep your eye on the sky, because at midnight tonight, the second season of the Bloodgames begins. Remember, if more than 10 of you remain after it's all said and done, you will carry over into Season 2. Boys and girls, it has been a pleasure being your host for the first season of the Bloodgames! I wish you all the best of luck. DJ went silent, and suddenly the sky was filled with what looked like storage containers with giant balloons attached to the top of them. Cameron sighed with pity for the poor souls who were only 15 hours away from dropping to their doom. The monsters, suddenly filled with rage, turned toward the only players they could see. Cameron heard a collective roar come from the valley below, and he took a deep breath. One by one, they began charging up the hill. "Here we go," Cameron shouted as fireballs formed in each of his hands. "Jasmine, on me! Floof, get some walls up! Alexa, just get ready for one hell of a fight!" Cameron hurled his fireballs down the hill, and they slammed into a green humanoid-looking beast. The flames ignited the moronic-looking creature's tattered clothes and began charring its skin. It belted a deep scream, and its flaming body flew backward and crashed to the ground dead, smoldering for a few moments. Ogre killed! Level 15, plus 750 experience. Jasmine fired her rifle next to him and started picking off enemies one by one. Cameron watched as a bipedal turtle creature with a pitchfork took a bullet between his eyes. His head cracked open like a melon, spraying the monsters behind him with a green, slimy blood. Jasmine's proficiency with the weapon was amazing, unlike anything he had seen thus far. She was able to make critical headshots like it was nothing. He was glad she was on his side. A blast from Cameron's ethereal cannon slammed into a gnome, tearing a hole through his wooden armor and sending his tiny body flying with a glistening arc of red blood trailing behind him. The small body's flight finally concluded as it smashed against the resurrection sphere in a crumpled mess of flesh that slowly slid down the side, leaving a slug-like trail of blood and entrails. Ew. Cameron cringed at the sight. Gnome killed. Level 15, plus 375 experience. Floof, we need walls! Cameron shouted as he threw a fireball down the throat of a roaring snake woman creature. He watched her eyes grow wide with sudden fear as everything below her head blasted into pieces. Scales littered the ground and pinged against Cameron's exosuit armor.
I'm working on it, Cameron,
Floof shouted.
Walls are not my speciality. Oh, come on, you bitch,
Alexa growled as she pulled Floof forward.
Keep my armor up, I'm sick of waiting.
Alexa suddenly had two broadswords in hand, and she charged forward with Floof in tow. As she leaped from the hill and crashed into the monsters, the sound of flesh ripping from the edges of her blades filled Floof's ears. He had all his ethereal abilities activated and was casting armor regen and heal on Alexa simultaneously.
Take this!
Floof shouted as he threw a minor regen boom at Jasmine and Cameron. The small stationary cylinder embedded itself into the ground, and 2 tendrils of white healing light suddenly attached themselves to Floof's party.
Oh, you fucking ugly-ass piece of smelly, slimy shit!
Alexa screamed as she bisected another turtle man creature. His guts and fluids spewed everywhere and reminded Floof of the last time he'd opened a shaken-up can of soda. He cringed at the sight and batted a creature away with his ethereal shield.
Back! Back, I say, you foul fucker!
Floof declared, enunciating every word properly. Alexa looked over at him briefly with a sour look on her face.
You fucking suck at cursing, Floof!
She called out as she ducked out of the way of a swooping eagle. One of her swords impaled the bird, sending feathers all over. The creature flailed as its inside stuck to the metal of her weapon, and Alexa rolled her eyes and pounded the bird against the head of a minotaur whose legs she had severed. Both the eagle and the minotaur howled in objection, but finally, after a broken neck and a split skull, they both died.
Oh, double kill, you twats!
Alexa sneered. She briefly turned to face the others.
Suck it.
A thin, white-skinned, imp-like creature dove forward with 2 jagged-looking blades trained on Alexa's chest. Floof dove to intercept it. The blades bounced off his armor, and Floof roared as he drove his ethereal sword up through the creature's sternum.
Die!
Floof screamed. He quickly unsummoned his ethereal shield and then resummoned it laterally. As the shield materialized, it easily cut through the face of the imp as the force of its energy cracked the skull. Blood and brains sizzled against the magic shield, and Floof's eyes grew wide.
Oh my,
he whispered.
The shield takes priority on the space-time location hierarchy!
He released a high-pitched squeal and briefly stomped in place with glee. Floof turned from Alexa and quickly summoned a narrow sliver of a wall. He imagined a pointed tip on the end of it and watched with delight as an ogre ran face first into his improvised pike.
Yes!
Floof screamed.
Kill all the things!
He looked into the air and summoned as large a wall as he could conjure. The wall began forming, and then when Floof released it, it crashed down, squishing the monsters beneath it. Rivers of blood seeped out from underneath the wall, and Floof threw his head back and laughed with game-breaking glee.
You should have had beta testers, you fools!
Floof shouted into the sky. You're doing great, Floof baby! DJ's voice suddenly replied. Keep up the good work! In the midst of battle, Floof suddenly gasped. He looked over at Alexa, then to his inventory.
Take over for a minute,
he shouted.
Just take over!
They can't kill them all, Behram, one of the survivors, said to Stephen as they watched from a platform on the top of the resurrection sphere. They just... No way they can. You don't know Cameron, Stephen sighed as he looked at the Iranian man. He's just like me. He doesn't fucking quit. By the way, what level are you? 14. Why? Behram replied. 14. Stephen slowly repeated. At that, he suddenly took hold of Behram and tossed him over the ledge. The man screamed as he tumbled over the side of the sphere, and his body split apart as he landed on the ground beneath. Stephen rolled his eyes and looked away for a moment. I hope you found what you were looking for out there, Cameron, Stephen said sincerely. I wish you understood. I wish you knew that I'm not your enemy. Stephen looked up at the containers in the sky and felt a wave of emotion come over him. He bit his lower lip as his eyes welled up. I'm not allowed to fucking quit, he shouted. I won't, not until Gabriel's safe. Day 7. 1,000 hours.
Yes!
Floof screamed as he swallowed his last ability nut.
I am immortal! What are you going on about?
Alexa shouted back.
And what are you doing back there? I just hit level 20!
Floof shouted.
I'm a god now! Gods have bigger dicks than you,
Alexa snapped.
But Grats, come on, help me out here.
Floof furrowed his brow and grumbled to himself for a moment about things like sufficient size and such, but then he remembered he was level 20. A smile returned to his face, and he charged forward to fight alongside Alexa with his newfound power. Turtle Warrior killed, level 15, plus 650 experience. Eagle killed, level 15, plus 750 experience. Ogre killed, level 15, plus 750 experience. Level up! Congratulations! Your hard work, boss and monster slaying, has paid off. You have reached level 21. You have obtained 2 stat nuts, 6 ability nuts, 3 skill nuts. Please allocate your nuts wisely. Your health and armor have been replenished. Craft healing item ability unlocked. Ether skill unlocked. Yes, Cameron whispered to himself as he quickly assigned his stat nuts to intelligence. He appointed 19 nuts to his new ether skill and then dumped his 6 ability nuts into ethereal cannon. Quickly, he took a look at the skill. Ethereal cannon, level 12, cost 150 AP, cooldown 1 minute, 500 to 550 ethereal damage, plus 994 to 1024 modifier, 1494 to 1574 total damage. Cameron grinned and hurried forward toward the others. Push! He shouted as he pointed his ethereal cannon at a minotaur. The creature snorted at him, and Cameron fired the ethereal cannon. The kinetic energy ripped the monster's body apart, sending limbs and blood flying in all directions. Floof groaned at the sight initially, but shrugged as he charged forward at Cameron's side. He could deal with it. Minotaur killed, level 15, plus 750 experience. Floof! Cameron called out as he blasted another ogre back. Walls!
By the damned sun!
Floof shouted back.
My wall skill is only level 1, Cameron! I'm not that kind of builder!
Cameron frowned as another surge of monsters pushed forward. They were a strong group, but they couldn't last forever. He had to get past the monsters and to the sphere. He had to get to Stephen. Cameron watched as Floof summoned slivers of walls and impaled creatures with them as he cast his ethereal cannon and bisected others. Perhaps Cameron needed to open his mind a bit. He recalled blasting the gnome all the way across the war zone and had a sudden dangerous thought. The flames of his fireballs had never hurt him before, even when they had blown up in his face. He bit his inner cheek as the crazy idea finally surfaced. Stay strong, Cameron shouted to his friends. Don't give up! Don't let them overwhelm you! At that, he refreshed his ethereal armor and turned around, aiming his ethereal cannon at the ground diagonally.
Oh God!
Floof shouted as he realized what Cameron was doing.
Take this!
Floof summoned the largest pillow he could and threw it at Cameron, who caught it and snickered. Here goes nothing. He fired his ethereal cannon and blasted himself high into the air. The monsters and his friends beneath him grew smaller as he flew higher and higher. He spun himself around so that he was facing the sphere and watched as the smooth, round surface came closer and closer into view. Oh my God, I'm an idiot! Cameron shouted as the air flew over him. This is going to hurt! Only seconds away from collision, Cameron held the mattress-sized pillow in front of him. The pillow slammed into the metal sphere, and Cameron crashed into the pillow, mitigating any potential damage from the impact. The pillow exploded into a cloud of feathers, and Cameron began to slide. No! He shouted as he wildly scraped his fingers against the metal, searching for a foothold. Sparks flew as his exosuit grinded against the sphere, and he grit his teeth as he fell. Suddenly, he felt the magnets in his feet activate, and all of a sudden he was attached to the sphere. Magnets also activated in his hands, and he sighed with relief. Okay, Cameron whispered, a bit shaken by the whole ordeal. Climb. Cameron lifted one of his hands, and the magnet disengaged. He raised it and felt the magnet re-engage as he placed it above him. Easy, he reassured himself as he began to slowly ascend the sphere. You got this. Cameron cleared about 12 feet before he heard something that rang an alarm in his head. It was a familiar screech. He had heard it only days before. Turning his head, he watched as 2 pteranodons flew his way. 2 pteranodons holding a man in an exosuit. Oh, fuck, Cameron sighed. He lifted his ethereal cannon and fired, but the pteranodon strafed out of the way. Cameron cursed and launched a fireball, yielding the same results.
Hello, cowboy!
Andreas shouted as he swooped in.
Fancy seeing you here?
Come on, Andreas! Cameron shouted as he pushed himself up to a standing position. "I don't have time for this!"
"Oh, but I do,"
Andreas called back.
"Stephen told me he would reward me if I killed you. He told me that you were a bad guy now."
"I'm not a damn bad guy!" Cameron shouted back. He watched as Andreas circled around him. "I'm your friend!"
"Stephen said you would say that,"
Andreas called back.
"He said you would try to be nice to me. I won't fall for your tricks."
"You don't want to do this, Andreas!" Cameron frustratedly yelled. "I don't want to hurt you!" Andreas swooped by and fired his minigun. The bullets pinged off Cameron's armor, doing 150 points of damage. Cameron growled and charged 2 fireballs. "That's enough!" he screamed. "Just stay out of my way, Andreas!" The Dutchman swooped in for another run, and Cameron reluctantly launched his fireballs. They exploded against the man, doing 1,500 damage cumulatively. Andreas shrieked as his pteranodons went up in flames and died from the damage shortly after. Cameron watched as the dead dinosaurs and Andreas fell. "God damn it!" Cameron shouted. "You idiot!" After half a second of falling, fire started shooting from his feet and slowed his fall. Cameron was relieved to see that the idiot didn't fall to his death. He knew Andreas had been manipulated and couldn't help himself. At that, Cameron continued climbing. As he finally crawled to the top of the sphere, Cameron sighed with relief and stared down at the metal beneath him. The intense desire to get his daughter's crystal burned heavily inside him. He was not going to fail this time. He was not going to let her down. The sound of a slow clap caused Cameron to look up and get to his feet. Stephen stood in his exosuit on the other side of the sphere, smiling widely. "You!" Cameron hissed as he stood. "Give me the bag!"
"That's no way to greet your friend now, mate,"
Stephen shouted back.
"Come on, let's talk this out man to man."
"No!" Cameron belted. Fireballs began cooking in his hands. He didn't want to risk the ethereal cannon at that height. "You know why I'm here."
"I know you're the most stubborn dickhead I've ever met."
Stephen laughed.
"Maybe that's why I like you so much. You might just remind me of myself at your age."
At his age? Stephen looked to be just a few years older than Cameron. What was he talking about? "Why did you betray us?" Cameron shouted. "We could have built a new world together."
"Because somebody in the old world needs my help, mate,"
Stephen answered.
"You see, my intentions are just like yours. My great-great-grandson Gabriel, he's dying. I need to win this game to use the money to save him."
"Great-great-grandson?" Cameron repeated. "What are you even talking about?"
"In the real world, I was an old man, 95 years old to be exact,"
Stephen said.
"When I was just a bit younger than you, I was fighting the Japanese in Malaya. All my friends died or were captured, but not me. I was a survivor, mate. I am a survivor."
"We can figure it out," Cameron called back. "We can save your grandson. We can—"
"There's only one way,"
Stephen snapped.
"Only one way, Cameron. We don't have to fight. Just join me. We can go home together. Nobody else needs to die."
Cameron thought it over. What was so bad about going home? Why did he resist the idea so much? He glanced up at the player count and saw 11 players were left. If he was going to revive Amanda, Pag, Hank, and all the others in that bag, then there were going to be many more than that. He shook his head. "No," he whispered. "No others will have to die. We have to find a better way. We can do it if we work together."
"Enough!"
Stephen shouted. He snarled at Cameron, and his exosuit's ethereal hammer appeared in his hand.
"Cameron, I'm sorry, mate, but there's no other way."
At that, the man charged.